fire when he heard the sound of footsteps dragging across the sand. A young Apache boy, around 5 years old, was staggering toward the water well. His body was so thin it looked like skin stretched over bone, and his legs trembled as if they could give out at any moment. His eyes were dark with hunger, fear, and exhaustion. Every step he took toward the well was a struggle just to keep breathing. Jonas stood still. In that moment, he saw again the faces of war children he had once encountered, lost, terrified, surviving on nothing but instinct. His heart tightened. Without a word, Jonas slowly opened the cabin door, placed a warm piece of cornbread on the porch step, and pointed to it. "Come here, have something to eat." The boy looked at him, hesitant, but hunger was stronger. He rushed to the cornbread, devouring it as if time itself was fighting to take his life. Jonas stood quietly nearby, never touching the child, just letting him know that this place held no danger. Once his stomach was calm, the boy dragged himself onto the porch and fell asleep right there on the wooden plank floor, his breathing weak but steadier. Jonas gently covered him with a thin blanket and stood watching for a long moment before heading back inside. The next morning, as the first light of day touched the well, the boy was gone. All that remained on the porch was the blanket, neatly folded, a silent thank you from a child who had just escaped death's grip. Jonas looked at the blanket, and something strange stirred inside him, as if a part of his buried humanity had just been touched. By noon the next day, the sun over Red Bluff scorched the earth like a burning blade, searing the dry ground. Jonas was stacking firewood behind the barn when he heard hurried footsteps on the sand. Not one person, two. He turned around. The Apache boy from the day before was standing by the fence. But this time, he was not alone. Right behind him stood a tall Apache woman, broad-shouldered like a warrior, with strong arms marked by sun and wind, but in her deep, dark eyes, there was no strength, only exhaustion. Pushed to the edge of despair, she held the boy's hand, her fingers trembling slightly from hunger and too many sleepless nights. As Jonas stepped closer, the boy immediately pressed against his mother's leg. His eyes were anxious, but he recognized Jonas. He was not as afraid as he had been the day before. The woman tried to stand straight, but her breathing was labored. She spoke in rough, weary English, her voice hoarse from thirst and fatigue. "Please, let us stay the night. We have been hunted for many days. No food, no water, please." Her voice was loud, strong but trembling from exhaustion. Jonas looked closer. Beneath the dust, her legs were bloodied, her arms marked with bruises. Someone had clearly been chasing them, and they had run until there was nothing left to run on. Jonas did not answer right away. He looked at the mother, taller than he was, built like someone who knew how to fight. Then at the boy, his face gaunt, wide eyes filled with both hope and worry, unsure if Jonas would turn them away. Jonas let out a long breath and opened the cabin door wide. "Come in. No one will harm you here." The woman blinked, as if she could not believe what she had just heard. The boy tugged gently at her hand. "Mom, that's the man who gave me food." Jonas paused for a moment at the sound of the boy's voice, clearer than yesterday. No longer just the whisper of someone barely clinging to life. He gave a faint smile. "Come on in, little one. It is cooler inside." As they stepped into the cabin, the woman's shoulders like walls sagged, as if she had just laid down the weight of the world at Jonas's doorstep. Jonas poured a glass of water and slid it toward her. "Drink. You are safe. Now." The woman took the glass in her scarred hand, her eyes glowing with a deep, wordless gratitude, the kind that only comes when someone walks through despair and finally touches a sliver of peace. The boy sat closer to Jonas this time, no longer shrinking away like he had the day before. Jonas looked at the mother and her child, then quietly wondered to himself, a man living alone in Red Bluff. Was he ready for his life to change? The answer, he knew, had already begun the moment he opened that door. That afternoon was gentler than most. After eating a bit of cornbread and drinking some water, the boy Tawi fell asleep right on the wooden bench near the stove. Jonas quietly laid a blanket over him, then turned to look at the boy's mother, Saka. She stood silently for a long moment, as if trying to believe that this place truly was safe. Her tall frame and broad shoulders, like a mountain wall that once seemed untouchable, now trembled slightly like grass caught in a cold wind. Jonas spoke softly. You should get some rest. You look like you are worn out. Sokka shook her head, her voice still hoarse but firm. No, let me help. I do not want to be a burden. She did not wait for him to respond. Instead, she began scanning the worn-down cabin. Within minutes, she had tied up the torn curtain, gathered loose firewood, and checked the porch roof. Her movements were quick, decisive, and strong, so much so that Jonas found himself simply watching, unable to interrupt. You do not need to do this, Jonas said. I want to. This place gave my son and me shelter, Sokka replied, her eyes steady and unwavering. Jonas said nothing. He was not used to someone stepping into his life, and even less used to the feeling of a house suddenly filled with life, footsteps, movement, presence. Sokka found an old pot hanging on the wall, filled it with some water, and pulled out a few dried herbs from a cloth pouch she carried. She lit a fire. Her large hands, despite their size, moved with the grace and ease of someone who had cooked all her life. You will like this soup, she said without looking at him. Jonas gave a quiet chuckle. You sound pretty sure of that. I have lived for years with almost nothing. Just trust me, she replied. The scent of the soup began to drift through the cabin, mixing with the smell of wood and smoke, creating something Jonas had not felt in years, something that smelled like home. Tawi woke up to the aroma, rubbed his eyes, and looked at Jonas. His eyes lit up. Can I play with your wooden horse? Jonas reached up to the shelf and took down the old toy. It was something he had kept from before the war, a piece of memory from when he still believed the world was big and gentle. He handed it to the boy. It is yours now. Tawi clutched the toy tightly, smiling for the first time since arriving in Red Bluff. A small, fragile smile, but one that lit up the dark corners of Jonas's cabin. Sokka looked at her son, then at Jonas. Her gaze softened. For the first time, her strong face was no longer shadowed by fear. Jonas suddenly realized, from today forward, this cabin was no longer just his. It now held warmth, laughter, and something he was not quite ready to name. Night fell in silence. Outside, the desert wind slipped through the old fence, creating long, haunting howls like the distant call of the wild. Inside the small cabin, the light of the oil lamp cast a warm glow on the faces of three souls who had just found each other amid a harsh world. Tawi was fast asleep, clutching the wooden horse to his chest like a treasure. Jonas gently closed the door and stepped out onto the porch. Sokka was already there, staring into the distance, as if the dust and wind still left invisible wounds on her spirit. Jonas leaned against the porch post. Having trouble sleeping? Sokka did not turn around. Her voice was heavy. I am afraid, if I fall asleep, we might have to run again. Jonas took a slow breath, searching for words that might comfort her. You are safe here, at least, as long as I can still stand. That made Sokka glance his way. In the light of the lamp, her deep black eyes no longer held only fear. There was something else now. Something softer, more honest. She sat on the step, resting her hands on her knees, her strong muscles trembling slightly. Are you sure? You want us to stay? Jonas sat beside her, leaving just enough space so she would not feel cornered but not so far as to feel like a stranger. I have not done much, but I do not regret opening that door. Sokka pressed her lips together, took a long breath as if gathering all the courage she had left. Then, she said something Jonas never expected to hear from a woman like her, an Apache warrior, tall and strong as a mountain. You are a good man. Let your life grow inside of me. Her voice was soft now, but steady. My son needs a father to guide him. Jonas froze. Her words were not a confession, not a plea. They felt more like surrender, not to him, but to the loneliness she had been fighting for so long. He turned and looked into her eyes, speaking slowly. Sokka, I do not know if I am worthy of what you just said. She shook her head. Worthy or not, my son already chose you. She glanced toward the door, where Tawi lay sleeping. He smiled because of you. And that is something I have not seen in a very long time. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of earth and cooking smoke across the porch. Jonas placed his warm hand over Sokka's strong hand. If you two need a place, this is it. In that moment, no more words were spoken, but both of them understood one thing. Tonight, in the ruined heart of Red Bluff, a family had just been planted. I am truly grateful for your presence here. If this story brought back memories of dusty evenings and the sound of hoofbeats echoing in your heart, subscribe to my channel, so every day we can sit together again, and I will tell you another story from the Wild West. That afternoon in Red Bluff was strangely still. There was no wind, only a silence so heavy it made Jonas stop halfway through fixing the fence. His instincts as a former soldier told him one thing. Something was coming. The sound of horse hooves pounded against the dry earth like a war drum. A large man on a black horse appeared in the distance, riding toward the cabin like a storm compacted into human form. Jonas gripped the shotgun in his hands, but he stood tall, not backing down an inch. Sokka stepped out of the cabin. The moment she saw the rider's silhouette, her face went pale. "He found us," she said softly. Her voice filled with both anger and fear. The man pulled his horse up close to the fence, yanking the reins. His voice was harsh, like stone grinding on steel. "Hey, you seen a big Apache woman with a boy about 5 years old?" Jonas did not answer right away. He studied the man from head to toe, the scar across his face, the cruel eyes, the smirk of someone used to hurting others to prove his power. Jonas had seen men like that before on the battlefield, brave when facing the weak, but trembling when faced with true resolve. At last, Jonas spoke slow, voice cold as forged iron. "She does not belong to you." The man let out a dry, mocking laugh, sneering through his teeth. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Jonas raised the shotgun. The barrel pointed straight at the man's chest, and in his eyes, deep, steady, and filled with the weight of war, there was no blink, no flinch. "You want to find out?" His voice was low but rang out like a canyon collapsing. The air went still. The man stared into Jonas's eyes, and in that brief moment, he understood he was not facing a frail farmer, but a soul who had walked through hell and returned. Sokka stood behind Jonas, like the shadow of a mountain. Though her hands still trembled, Jonas stood firmly between them, not leaving so much as a gap. The man clenched his jaw, rattled by the force he could not match. His eyes flicked to the cabin, to Sokka, then back to Jonas. A grunt slipped from his throat. He yanked the reins. The horse turned. He rode off without looking back. As the sound of hooves faded completely, Sokka exhaled, her shoulders collapsing like she had just slipped free from invisible chains. Jonas placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "He is not coming back." Sokka looked at him, not with fear, but with absolute trust. And in that quiet afternoon, Jonas understood. He had not just protected her from a man who hunted her. He had cast him out of the past that had imprisoned her for far too long. Spring arrived with a strange warmth that crept into every corner of Jonas's cabin. The cold had eased, and the mornings no longer carried the emptiness they once did. Instead, each day began with the sound of small footsteps pattering across the wooden floor. Tawi had changed so much in just a few weeks. The frail Apache boy who had first arrived was now full of life, his steps steadier with each passing day. In his hands, always, was the wooden horse, an item Jonas thought he had kept only as a memory of the past, but which had now become a treasure to the child. One morning, as Jonas was sanding down a post on the front porch, Tawi ran up to him, eyes gleaming like a lake after rain. "Jonas, look at me." The boy jumped forward with a big leap, then grinned, flashing small, bright white teeth. Jonas laughed. "You're stronger than before." Tawi scooted closer, standing beside Jonas like it was the most natural place in the world. After a moment, the boy tugged at his shirt. You're not gonna leave me and Mama, right?" Jonas froze mid-motion. Then he placed his hand on the boy's head, gentle but firm. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Tawi smiled, a real smile, free of worry. Then he dashed back inside, leaving Jonas standing still for a moment. That question. It was both a promise and a quiet recognition that his life had taken a new path. In the kitchen, Sokka was stirring a fresh pot of soup, when Tawi came in and proudly shared what had just happened. She looked out toward the porch. In that brief moment when their eyes met, neither she nor Jonas said a word. They did not need to. Both understood the quiet change growing between the three of them. That afternoon, Sokka came out to help Jonas move a pile of firewood. She lifted a large log like it was a twig. Jonas chuckled. "You're strong." Sokka shrugged. "Apache people have to be strong to survive." Jonas answered, "You don't have to be strong here." Sokka paused and set the log down. Her eyes softened in a way that only those who had lived through deep pain could. She said quietly, "Tawi, he trusts you." "And that doesn't happen often." Jonas stepped forward close enough for his words to reach her with warmth. "I trust both of you, too." The spring wind blew through Red Bluff, carrying with it the scent of good earth and new life. And in that moment, Jonas understood. He was no longer living for himself. A family had taken root on this harsh land, and he was a part of it. Night was falling, and the deep purple of dusk wrapped itself around the distant cliffs. Jonas sat on the porch, listening to the crackle of firewood and the soft sounds of Tawi playing with the wooden horse inside the cabin. A strange kind of peace flowed through a place that had once held nothing but silence and memories of war. Sokka stepped out onto the porch, her shadow stretching long across the ground. Her tall, powerful figure had once made men keep their distance. But now there was something gentle, almost tender, in the way she moved. She sat down beside Jonas, silent for a long while, as if waiting for her heart to speak, before her voice did. Jonas glanced at her, his voice low and warm. "Are you all right?" Sokka clasped her hands together, a gesture Jonas had rarely seen from her. This was a woman who had fought, who had carried the weight of the sky on those strong shoulders. And yet in this moment, she looked like someone afraid of losing something fragile. "I am not used to days this quiet," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Tawi and we have never had a place to stop and stay." Jonas understood that feeling. He too had once believed all he had left was war and solitude. Sokka turned to him, looking straight into his eyes. "That day, when you stood in front of him, you were not afraid." "Why?" Jonas narrowed his eyes, remembering the man. "Because I had to protect you too." That mattered more. A gentle breeze lifted Sokka's long hair across her shoulder. She spoke then, her voice low and honest, so much so that Jonas felt every word land deep. "Tawi trusts you, Jonas. He has never trusted anyone but me." Then she placed her large, warm, strong hand over his. "And I trust you too." Jonas felt the warmth move through his skin, slow but steady, like a hidden spring finding its way to the surface. He asked softly, "What do you trust in me?" Sokka's gaze did not waver. "I trust that you will not leave us behind. I trust that you are a better man than this world ever gave you credit for." Inside the cabin, Tawi's laughter rang out pure, carefree, as if to place a perfect period at the end of his mother's sentence. Jonas gave her hand a gentle squeeze, answering her trust with a promise that needed no words. "I am here for both of you." Sokka leaned her head against Jonas's chest, her breathing slowing, as if she had finally found a new rhythm of life. And beneath the rising moon, a strong Apache warrior finally allowed herself to lean on someone. Red Bluff was no longer just a place to hide. It was becoming a home. That morning, dawn arrived more slowly than usual. Pale golden light spread over the hills, slipped through the cracks in the cabin walls, waking to the soft scent of coffee and the steady breathing of three people learning how to belong to one another. Jonas opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The early breeze brushed against his face, cool and fresh, a feeling he thought he might never experience again. On the ground, Tawi's small footprints zigzagged across the yard, as if the boy had gotten up early to play before the sun rose. A moment later, the cabin door opened softly. Tawi burst out, hugging his wooden horse to his chest. "Jonas, can we go down to the creek today?" Jonas leaned down and tousled the boy's hair. "Of course we can. But first, breakfast." Tawi nodded eagerly, then dashed back inside like a little whirlwind. Sokka stepped out behind her son, her long hair falling over her strong shoulders, her face carrying a sense of ease Jonas had never seen before. The Apache woman, who once breathed fear with every step, now seemed more at peace. As if this harsh land had finally opened its heart to her. She stopped beside Jonas, looking out across the open space, where only wind and sun touched the earth. For the first time in years, "I do not want to run anymore." Jonas turned to her not because her words surprised him, but because of how she said them softly, truthfully, weighted with quiet hope. He replied gently, "You do not have to run. Not as long as you have me, and this place." Sokka was silent for a moment, then spoke in a warm, grounded voice. "Taui called you his father when he thought I could not hear. He said, 'Father will protect me.' And I knew. He had already chosen you." Jonas drew in a quiet breath. A man who once believed all he had left was loneliness was now standing before something far greater, a family. He placed his hand over Sokka's strong hand, gave it a gentle squeeze. "I am not here to replace anyone, but I will do everything I can to keep you both safe." From inside the cabin, Taui's voice rang out, "Papa Jonas, I'm hungry." Jonas laughed. Sokka did too. Her smile, rare, beautiful, and genuine, seemed to warm the sun-drenched stillness of Red Bluff. The three of them walked into the cabin. On the table was a small cooking fire, a warm pot of soup, and a few simple wooden bowls. Not lavish, not complete, but enough for a home. No one said it out loud, but they all knew. They were no longer wandering souls. They had found each other, and Red Bluff, a land once ruled by wind and silence, had become their home. Dear friend, love cannot erase the past, but it softens the shadows we thought we'd carry forever. Everyone bears a wound, some hidden in silence, others worn like stones on the shoulders. But when love arrives, it does not ask us to be strong right away. It simply asks us to open a small door. Through that door, kindness enters, and stitches together the pieces we believed were beyond repair.